response to this meeting. We're going to wait for a few minutes before starting this session. We see more and more people joining from the Ministry of Education of Honduras, also people from the Ministry of Education of El Salvador and St. Vincent, Guyana. Welcome. We also see people from civil society organizations. Erica, it's so nice to see you. We also see several people from teacher groups. We're going to begin the session in about 2 minutes so that more people can join. If you want, you can introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and the institution that you work for, as well as your country. Hello, Erica. Thank you for joining us today. Rocío from Monterrey, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Ditma, qué gusto tenerte por acá nuevamente desde Honduras.
And also Vilma from Honduras.
Muchísimas gracias por irse sumando a este espacio.
Thank you so much for joining this session. We will begin in about a minute.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Nice to see you from Granada. Qué gusto ver tantas caras conocidas que se vienen sumando, que nos han acompañado.
It's so nice to see all these faces of people who have been joining us for years. Elga, so nice to have you here from El Salvador. For those who don't know me, I introduce myself. My name is Mar Botero, and I lead the strategy of KIX Lab, and I will be with you during this session. Thank you so much once more for joining us. We're waiting to have a lot of people today from different organizations of civil society, people from the Ministry of Education. Nelsie, Florencia, so nice to have you here today. It's good to have you here. Okay, so we will begin this conversation space. It's a pleasure to open this dialogue, which belongs to the knowledge mobilization space of KIX Lab. This is a space for collective thought and for strengthening the use of evidence culture in Latin America. And this year, our focus is to talk about policies and practices in teaching. For those who just joined us today, please tell us, we're going to tell what KIX is. This is a cycle of knowledge mobilization on use of evidence. And this center, KIX, for Latin America and the Caribbean, is a space of collaboration and exchange between leaders of the teaching sector in the region, with countries such as Dominica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as St. Lucia. This is an initiative which is led by the Global Partnership by Education and the center, the International Development and Research Center of Canada, and it is led in this region by SUMMA and the OECS. We want here to have knowledge and public practice to promote dialogue spaces where we don't only share evidence, but we talk about it, we question it, and we use it precisely to make decisions for the policies and teaching practices. This is a long work for about a year, which begins in spaces like these, where we listen to each other and we think together. And from there, we begin to develop many exchange initiatives, and we produce many products for disseminating knowledge, such as seminars, in order to focus and go deep into the challenges that we're going to discuss today. This year, we have chosen this topic because from 2020, KIX has been building a priority agenda defined with you all, and this topic has been very present throughout the years. Last year, we worked with early childhood education, and this year we're going to update our regional agenda of priorities with strategic programs for 2026, and at the end of this event, we will tell you more about how this process will be. And we hope, obviously, that the people present here today will participate actively during the year. This session, we will begin with a general panorama of the regional strategy for Latin America and the Caribbean of UNESCO, and then we will incorporate the voice of teachers in order to have a dialogue which will enable us to build and identify shared priorities. So your participation in this space is key, and the value of this space depends on your interventions, your questions, the priorities that we can identify in order to recognize also the progress that we've had in our territories, and also to fill the gaps, the knowledge gaps that persist in the region. In this space, we will talk about topics such as gaps in teacher training, teaching conditions, and also challenges in governance, financing, implementation of policies in your countries. This seems like very large topics, but it's just a starting point. And throughout the year, we will have different spaces in order to talk in detail in these topics in the agenda. Just as housekeeping, this space will have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, English, and French. So if you have a question, we also have this feature available on Zoom. You can raise your hand if you want to have a question, make a question, and we will open your microphone. Today, we have a very diverse audience with participation of diverse countries in the region. As I mentioned, representatives from the ministries, international organizations, from the academia, and we're very happy about this because this diversity of looks helps to drive this conversation. To begin formally this webinar, I invite the senior Valtencir Mendes, which is the senior director in programs of initiatives for teaching. He will present the main aspects and priorities and challenges of the regional strategy for Latin America. Valtencir, thank you for accepting this invitation and welcome. Thank you so much to you. Thank you for this invitation. You have asked me to speak in English, so I'm going to switch languages. IDRC, SUMMA, OECS, all the organizers for this invitation for us, UNESCO. It's a pleasure to be here. On a personal note, I worked in the past from HQ, from UNESCO in projects linked to the GPE, and I was in some of the events at the global level as well, and with the different GP KIX. So very, very happy to be here with you today. So we are going to talk about this regional teachers strategy, but let me just start by invite you to reflect in the moment we are living today. We
we believe we are in a very decisive moment for education in our region. It's a moment marked by urgency, but also by extraordinary possibilities. Know that around us we have societies that are changing, at great speed. We have technologies, that are reshaping how we live and work. What can I tell about AI at this moment? However, we still see a lot of inequalities. We see that in some places they are even deeper, getting even deeper than before. And democracies are tested as well in some of our countries. So in this context, one truth remains for us really constant. There is no transformation that is fair, sustainable, or lasting without teachers. So teachers must be in the center, in the center of this education transformation. So if we go to the next slide, we see that teachers are not just a variable among many that we have, and we appreciate obviously the research and the variables that we have, but teachers are definitely, they are a living infrastructure, we like to put in this way, of the education systems. They are the backbone of this education transformation. And they are this human link, between policy and practice, between this aspiration, and the reality, between the promise of rights and their fulfillment in the classroom, for example. And when teachers are supported, respected, empowered, education systems really thrive. And when they are neglected, on the other hand, there is no reform, for more sophisticated they can be, that really can succeed is without this key element that is teacher. If we go to the next slide, we see that why UNESCO, together with governments, unions, academia, civil society, teachers themselves, has been working this regional teacher strategy for our region. For us, it's key. It's key to have a general framework that we can have the same semantics, the same way of putting the problems in a sort of frame and talk about them and see how we can solve or try to solve this big challenge that we have today. As a starting point, we worked with this global report that you can see in the screen that is basically the global report that UNESCO worked for also some years, that put did a zoom in everything that has to do with teacher shortage that we'll see in a moment as well. So in the next slide, we see that we have a diagnosis that is quite clear in our region, right? We work with different partners, and here you can see how this strategy was developed, with many partners, and we are very proud to have more than 120 governmental and non-NGOs and unions from from 27 countries. So this is how we did it. So in the next slide, please, we can see that, sorry, there is a slight delay for this. The next, please. Yeah. So here we see what the diagnosis that we did revealed. So basically we see localized shortage of qualified teachers, mainly in rural areas, in the vulnerable communities. And some countries are even talk about a teacher blackout, because we know the data shows that we need 3.2 million teachers until 2030 in our regions. And we know there are many reasons. We know that in many of our countries, if we look into the first 5 years of the teaching profession, we are losing almost 20% of this workforce. So some countries, even for example, in the English-speaking Caribbean, we see sometimes some brain drain, some teachers also leaving to other countries. So there are a different number of reasons impacting on that. We also see precarious working conditions. We see career pathways that are very limited in many countries. Teachers' voices that are absent from decision making. We see that in some policy making process, they weren't present, and we see as well that training systems are uneven, and processes of induction and mentoring are also very weak. We see in some countries, for example, that we have teacher training online without practice, enough hours of practice. So teachers don't have this practical dimension. And all these challenges are not abstract. Obviously, they affect real classrooms, real students, and real communities. No? So we need to work on that. So if we go to the next slide, we see that what this strategy is developing. So what we try to do with all these partners and the people that worked on it is produce a document together, right? It's not an isolated document. And this is the result of all this collaboration that I mentioned. And is a strategy that builds not just in diagonals, but in this conviction that the teaching profession must be placed at the core of the education system. So if we see these slides that you are having here, you see a strategy that proposes a cross-cutting axis that are the vision of the profession, that are anchored in professionalization, autonomy, inclusion, gender responsible policies as well, and social dialogue. And then we see that at the same level, it's very key to have some enabling factors. And here, obviously, the sustainable financing for the teaching profession is key, something that UNESCO and partners have been working very strongly. Also having robust monitoring systems, clear mechanisms for recognition and appreciation. And without these the commitments that we can have in some ecosystems, it would be just rhetorical. No? So we need to bring this in a combined way, as we are trying to see here. We try to show here that when you have, for example, this put together, we can try to get these 4 results that we are seeking. The first one is the overall advancement of the SDG 4C, dedicated to teachers, then teacher and school leadership training, properly done, the professionalization, working conditions, and well-being, and then the recognition and appreciation of the profession. So if we go to the next slides, we see that we have some dimensions that what I mentioned before are not separate agendas, so they are interdependent dimensions, and improving training, for example, without improving professionalization and working conditions will not retain teachers or attract new teachers. If we raise salaries without strengthening professional development and well-being, also this will not ensure quality. And if we have a strong program in recognition without bringing the voice of the teacher community, this will be also not effective. So if I'm going very fast, okay, very quickly because of the time. So next slide, please. Here we can see some examples of the line of action. So the strategy brings key components. I won't go into the detail, but you can see here the dimensions. For each dimension, there are some line of actions. And in the next slide, we see a concrete example that shows objectives. So we have one objective, in this case, is promote a smooth transition from teacher education programs to professional practice. And we see some actions, some indicators, and who are responsible, who should work on that according to this view. In the next slide, we have a question. How do we solve this puzzle of implementation? Because okay, it's good to have these global or regional frameworks, but the key is in the implementation dimension. And we believe that by treating implementation as a science, not as an afterthought, we can advance in the right direction. So in the next slide, we see that this strategy does not belong to a single institution, and we want to solve this puzzle together, with this collective ownership that we believe we built during we were working on the strategy, but we also have an opportunity now to do the same. So with each country defining its own pathway. This is not a top-down approach, is a framework that basically wants to be at the service of the countries, and we work with the countries, design a specific methodology with each context, and in this way we can build a unique portfolio of strategic view in terms of each education system and each teaching reform, for example. So the strategy must be situated within this broader historical turning point that we believe that is education systems are navigating right now, with everything that I mentioned in the beginning. And this leaves, let me say, we believe that leaves no room for fragmented efforts, or just isolated solutions. I think it's really key that we need this collective action, what we are doing here today, sharing knowledge and try to bring collective action together that are grounded in evidence, this also dialogue, and in a commitment, that we can work better together. So if we go to the next slide, we see that we would like to do an invitation to you all to join this effort, to move from a fragmented initiative to a shared vision. So here we put 3 areas from advocacy, research projects, training projects, and find other ways maybe in which we can work together to be with countries in the field, bring in this reflection that this framework of the regional strategy brought to us. In the next slide, we see one sentence, okay, and that is here, we put that is transform to teach, teach to transform. We want this not to be a slogan, it's a call to action, it's a call to place teachers, where they really belong, that is at the center of the educational change, and at the heart of the social progress that we believe that we need. And we have been working with, in the last months, for example, in the region, we organized a global summit dedicated only to teachers. And there we saw different strategies, many countries showing good practice. We also saw the Antigua commitment, the event that was held and also by the partners of this event today. And there are elements as well that I think is speaking to the regional teacher strategy that we are presenting now, but also to these global events that all the partners are together to try to really put the teaching profession and the teacher reform at the center of the education transformation. So that is the invitation that we cannot move ahead with this reform without reviewing, without having these frameworks that we believe has many elements as an entry point, as a starting point for each country work on their own strategy for their teacher community. So that is, I want to give more space for question and answers later, but the document right now is available and in the current version is in Spanish. We are working in an English one, but in the website we'll share here in the chat, there are many documents in English, like all the outcomes of the Global Teachers Summit, and also other initiatives we will be working the coming month, also with the partners here. But the invitation is that let's try not to have a single isolated action, and bring this kind of approach that we work together with a solid framework built in evidence, and also creating this dialogue with the local reality and not having a top-down approach. So is somehow a framework that inform the local discussion, but that the solutions only can come directly from the country, from the national reality. So UNESCO is happy to engage countries and partners in this discussion and build on the work with many 27 countries that are reflected in this strategy. I will stop here. I hope I wasn't too fast. and we can have some space for debate and discussion as well. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Valtencir, por tu valiosa presentación. Quisiera
Thank you for your
justamente
presentation.
retomar esa última
I
idea
want to
clave que nos
continue with that last
compartiste,
idea
que
that you
finalmente esto
shared.
es un framework
This is a
donde toma
framework,
sentido
but where it
quien
makes
tiene que ponerse
sense,
en el
and the
centro de
one
la
who needs to be at
conversación
the
son
core of the conversation
precisamente las personas
are
que están en los territorios,
people
que
who are in
conocen
the
sus
different territories
desafíos
because they know their
y que son los
challenges
protagonistas de
and they
sus
are the main actors
soluciones.
of their
Dicho eso,
solutions.
justamente
Having
ahora
said
quiero
that,
continuar
now I want
invitando
to
a Sharon
continue
Clifton.
inviting
Ella es
Sharon
la
Clifton.
presidenta del
She's the
Sindicato de
president of the
Docentes del
Union of
Caribe
Teachers of the
y Sharon es una
Caribbean.
líder
Sharon is a leader, a educational leader in the
15
Caribbean with
años
more
de
than 15
trayectoria
years
como
of
docente,
experience as a
directiva
teacher.
escolar y dirigente
He's been
sindical. Actualmente es
he's
directora
been
ejecutiva
leading
de la
at
antigua
different
Barbuda National
elements.
Accreditation
She
Board y
is part of the board of the
presidenta
Barbuda
justamente del
Accreditation Board, and she's
Sindicato del
president
Caribe.
of the Union of the
Sharon,
Caribbean.
muchísimas gracias
Sharon,
por aceptar
thank
esta
you
invitación
for
y
accepting
bienvenida.
this invitation. You're most welcome. The floor is all yours.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good
Good afternoon,
morning.
everyone.
It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy I'm coming after Valtencir's presentation because so much of what he says interacts with what I have to present this afternoon, and it just shows how similar we are and our challenges are within the region and within Latin America. Within the Caribbean, our teaching profession stands at a historic crossroads. As we embrace the regional drive towards foundational literacy and numeracy, we also have to acknowledge that no educational reform can outpace the quality and stability of our teaching force. While there is a general appreciation for evidence-based practice, as the engine of change, this engine will stall if not fueled by the lived experiences of professional dignity and socioeconomic security of the Latin American and Caribbean teacher. Within the Eastern Caribbean, we have some challenges that we continue to face, that we faced for many years. And I must preface this part of what I will say by saying it is not a gloom and doom presentation. I'm not looking at it from, we can't come out of this, but this is the reality that we are facing on the ground. We have a migration crisis. And I have said to my Ministry of Education, I live in Antigua, I teach in Antigua, and it might seem like if we lose one teacher here and there, it's not a big deal. But because we're such a small society, every year, if we continue to lose 2 and 3 and 4 teachers and more are leaving because the American society is recruiting and the UK, they're recruiting our teachers. And because of the challenges we face locally within Antigua and the region, it seems more attractive to them. And so our teachers are leaving. And though it may be 2 this year, next year it might be 3. And last year it was 5. And those numbers add up. And that is the reality that we are facing on the ground. We also have an issue of a digital burden that our teachers are faced with now. So we push digital transformation, but the reality is we still teach in classrooms, brick and mortar classrooms that are not built for digital transformation. A lot of our classrooms look the same way they did 50 years ago when they were first built. And if that is going to be the case, then we're not inviting our students and our teachers into a space that can be transformative. We are not providing enough support, and we continue to struggle with connectivity issues. So I know here in Antigua, one of our challenges has been at the primary school level, though our teachers want to use technology in the classroom, they can't because there's no connectivity. And so we live in an era where there's AI and we're pushing transformation, but the resources are not there to support. Yet there is still that demand on the teacher to create digital citizens, that our students must be able to use these resources. They must be able to navigate the web and navigate AI issues, but they're not given the resources to teach the students how to navigate those issues. And we also struggle with the issue of climate and well-being, because the reality is we live in the Caribbean and climate change is very real to us. Just last year, Jamaica was ravaged by Hurricane Melissa. The Mexican Gulf Coast was ravaged by rains early in October. And when these things happen, our schools are affected, our students are affected, and our teachers are burdened because they now have to find a way to recover the time that was lost while continuing to try to keep pace with the curriculum and how fast it's going, while also supporting our students emotionally and trying to find their way through all of this emotionally as well. So we continue to struggle with these issues within the Caribbean. There are things that we have to do, and I am really happy that Valtencir kept bringing that up, that it is a matter of working together. We cannot be isolated right now. We have to come together and we have to work together. We have to move away from a top-down evidence delivery. It cannot be that we use statistics and we use evidence just to say this school is better than this one, or just to say we're going to give the top school more resources and schools in the rural areas are still struggling. We have to move away from that. We have to move away from the resource inequity that we are facing within the Caribbean, that we don't get enough. And although some of our governments will, tout that the education ministry gets the lion's share of the resources financially every year, there's a budget. So yes, we give education the most money, but what is that money being used for? How are we really investing that money? Or is it really just going to salaries and then the resources that we really need are not there? And we cannot escape it. A big part of our problem is that a lot of our teachers, they are getting survival salary. They're not being paid well. And so when they are being recruited by the United States, when they are being recruited by Canada, when they are being recruited by the UK, there's not much that we can do because we are not paying them well. And in addition to not paying them well, we are not creating a space for them to feel comfortable because the school space is still not advanced. It's not as safe as it should be. We still have issues with security. Just last week, one of our schools, there was a fire at one of our schools that damaged the administrative building, and that has left our teachers feeling wrecked. And so I'm not being paid well. I am not working in a space that is safe. I'm not being given the resources. When all these things culminate, it makes it very easy for these other countries to recruit our teachers and for them to want to leave. And when I think about how can we possibly address these issues, I will continue to reiterate what the first speaker says, that we have to work together. We have to promote action research within our schools and encourage our teachers to use the information that they get through action research to enhance the teaching and learning process. There must be social dialogue. And the Caribbean Union of Teachers and unions within our territories must be a part of that dialogue. We don't just negotiate for salaries. We do so much more than negotiating for salaries. And when we think about advancing teachers, advancing the cause of teachers, we have to ensure that our unions are part of that social dialogue, our other stakeholders, our parents, our National Parent Teachers Associations, that they're also part of that dialogue. So I'm hoping that through this conversation, I am so glad that I was invited here today. I am grateful for the opportunity to share our experience and for what this year will look like, for the conversations that will happen beyond today. And so I just want to say thank you for inviting me to share just a bit of what we go through in the Eastern Caribbean. It's just a small bit. It doesn't even scratch the surface of some of the challenges that we really do have. But there are a lot of challenges. But I think, as our first speaker rightfully said, though there are challenges, this is a great opportunity for us to come together and work together and find ways to solve the issues that we are facing now within the region and within Latin America.
Muchísimas gracias, Sharon, por esa precisión.
Thank you, Sharon, for being so accurate in the challenges that you're going through. Not only the teachers of the Western Caribbean, but also the rest of the region have big challenges. Teachers are the first line facing the challenge of this financial literacy, migration, the climate change. So I feel that it's a conversation that we're going to go deeper into later in this conversation space. Before we go to the second moment of this conversation, I'd like to invite our listeners, to ask questions. Are there any observations or questions? Would you like to make any comments or questions to our first two speakers? I'm going to give some seconds so you can raise your hand or, I don't know, ask your questions in the chat box. Victor Crisales. Yes, Victor, the floor is yours. Good morning, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. I want to ask this gentleman from UNESCO, Valtencir, which is the role, which is the path for finding a balance between the demands that teachers have in the collective pacts, for working conditions, and the ministers of education, the ones in charge of there, because in the case of Guatemala, that has been a problem, an issue that the current administration has been facing. Thank you. Victor, can you tell us, where you're from? You said you were from Guatemala. What's your role? Where institution are you representing? Let's see, currently, I am the coordinator, national coordinator for this collective of education for everyone in Guatemala. We're developing a project in the area of Santa Cruz municipality in the north of the country. We're working there. We're working with children, preschool students, and we have teachers, directors, heads, and heads of different ministers are supporting us. So therefore, we're advancing in the project which we're developing together with children, first infancy children, preschool teachers. Thank you, Victor. So Valtencir, the floor is yours. Thank you, Victor. Thank you for your question. It is a question that not only for Guatemala, but many of our questions are asking about this. So I'm going to start with an assumption. I don't believe there's an administration or a group, a representative of teachers, not willing to improving the teachers' policies or working conditions, and in the end, improving education quality as a whole in the country. So I would say that there are many difficulties sometimes, not really in this conversation between the different forces, representatives of the different collectives of teachers and the public administration in the different countries. But we see some cases of success also. I won't mention any countries, but there are some cases of success where that conversation, dialogue was done in a respectful manner, and therefore they could advance together. So that is one of the elements that are there in the strategy, which is no policy, educational policy, not considering teachers should be there, but not in a figurative manner, but when creating this policy or this strategy, there must be, teachers should be there. They should be included at the tables of co-construction of this policy. So this is something that it is mentioned in all of the different world events of education, teachers. It is important to have this voice, because otherwise, policies are going to be built in a top-down manner, not considering or including the reality of these teachers. So let's say that there's no exact science here, but there are some elements of the strategy. There are some recommendations, but there's mutual acknowledgement that all of these realities wants to contribute to this transformation. And I'm convinced that that is the same situation in your country. And the way of doing it is opening this space of conversation and co-construction. It is easier said than done, because there are some situations where there's no agreement, but that's where science is. We need to find a solution for for these situations in order to work, in order to have a better education in the country. So it's basically that. So that is the quote of finding more information about this strategy. But dialogue and integrating these teachers in the creation in a concrete manner with methodologies of participation, active ones which are meaningful. So this voice and what's coming from these communities, it is truly shown in the policies. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Valtencir. Michelle Bradford.
Thank you very much, Valtencir. Michelle, would you like to share your question directly?
¿Y tu presentación?
Thank you, Mar. Hello, I'm Michelle. I'm the principal for itinerant teachers for the deaf in Grenada. I'm also the president and founder of Advocacy Grenada, a non-governmental organization working with and for people with disability, and vice president of the Caribbean Disability Network. My concern, though, is was research really done, or are you thinking of doing research in relation to the associate degree that most of our Caribbean teachers, the program that they follow, a teacher education program, which most of the Eastern Caribbean teachers would have. This is under the University of the West Indies for most countries. Have we looked into the pedagogy in relation to inclusive practices, inclusive education, action research, reflexive practice? Does the program that is being offered, because if we're thinking about the teaching and learning process, does the program that is being offered to our teachers, is it fit for purpose?
Maybe I can come in. I can come in. Smart. Nice meeting you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have this conversation. Indeed, we've been working with the University of West Indies. And through the Joint Board of Teacher Education, we have been updating and also implementing a new version of the ADE, the Associate Degree of Education. So glad to have that specific conversation. It would be great to have actually a specific meeting to know better your perspective about it. Actually, the curriculum has been updated from the inclusive pedagogies. So together with Dr. Bristol and the team and the colleges, of course, we're working directly with the College of Grenada, but also the other colleges as well in the Eastern Caribbean. The new version of the AD curriculum for primary education will be implemented from September of this year. So just to say, Michelle, that the initial teacher education is so relevant that definitely this year, in the context of this cycle of policies and practices on teachers, we will be discussing not only about in-service teacher professional development, but also we are addressing the challenges and progress also on the initial teacher education programs. But thank you so much for the question. We will continue on this. We are actually addressing the challenges on inclusive education as well. So thank you for the question. Of course, colleagues Valtencir or Sharon, if you want to comment as well, please.
Yes, I haven't been one who would have gone through that program, because I did do the teacher training program as well. I think what I have always found is there's not an issue with the theory. The theory I've always found to be very sound. I think the disconnect comes when you have to translate that theory into practice. So there seems to be a gap between what I learn in the classroom while I'm at teacher training and then what I do once I get to school. And I think one of the ways we can address that gap is mentorship. Because, part of the program, you have to spend a term, the last term of your 2-year stint at the program, you spend in a school where you're doing teaching practicum. And during that time, you do have teachers who would assist you. If you're taking over a teacher's class, that teacher would provide some guidance. I think that guidance needs to continue even after you've completed the program and you're placed in a school. there needs to be a mentorship program and onboarding that happens coming back from teacher training. So I think that's where a lot of the gap happens. Not so much with the theory, but between the theory and the practicum, what happens once I get back into the classroom full time.
Just a quick note to say that yeah, it's a good question. I don't think we all have this sorted out, but in terms of inclusion and the students with a disability, we have been working in some indicators in having some better data coming from the countries, because what we saw is we don't have enough information on that. So we have a project. I will put the link here and the website, but it's a work in progress. But at least there are some efforts there coming together to try to have these students and people with disabilities also very present when we do research and we collect data, and so we can have better policy. So this is just a small thing, but is a project that is part of a network that has been worked in Latin America for 20 years. So there are a lot of exchange. We have the last meeting in Bolivia with teachers with disability coming and really sharing their information, their practice in terms of how they are teaching, and with, for example, people with a specific disability, how they can actually developing some practical teaching materials that really are focused this community. So I will put the link here and you can follow up that if you want. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Valtencir. Vamos a cerrar este espacio con una última
Thank you,
pregunta.
Valtencir. We're going to close this space with one last question from Grenada. Diane.
Good afternoon. Yes,
Good
I can
afternoon.
hear me. Maybe I can. All right. So my question that I want to ask is something with bridging the evidence and decision-making gap, because we are small island states with limited capacity. And from the KIX LAC perspective, what are the most effective mechanisms that ministries can use to institutionalize the translation of the evidence into teacher policy decisions? That's in relation to small systems where capacity is limited, and of course speed matters because we want to get things done, we want results, and though we have to be particular about being too quick with things and not making the right decisions, but we want them to happen in a reasonable time.
If I were to jump in here, I think what you're asking is what can we do to help our governments, or what can our governments do to ensure that we go from, and you can correct me if I'm misinterpreting your question, but what can we do to go from policy where we find the evidence to then developing policy within our school? Practicality. I think honestly, I think it's a matter of political will. And I think we need to have some strong public administrators. And when I say public administrators, I speak of like our PSs within our ministries and our education officers, our planners, within the ministries of education, who can push these things, because it is a matter of political will. So we are not, one of the things I've noticed about the Eastern Caribbean is research isn't always our very strong point. And so what we may have to do is to tap into, for example, like UNESCO, tap into these international organizations that can give support for research. And then in part of that research, include our teachers. Let there be a connect between the research and then the implementation. I think if they're involved even from the research side of things, it may be easier to develop policy and implement policy. But from what I have seen, it is a matter of political will. We do get support to do research, we do get support to develop policies, but it's just, do we have that political will to really intentionally implement those policies, have the hard conversations, include our stakeholders, parents, teachers, corporate citizens, to ensure that that is done.
I'm not sure if I'm permitted to respond again, but I concur with you, but I also hasten to add that sometimes it's not even that we do not have research, because maybe with us ourselves are not doing enough research, but there's a lot of research that we have access to. And sometimes it's just getting from the research to actually getting the action done, the recommendations that are made. And many times we can point to the capacity that we have as small island states. So this is where I was leaning towards with the question.
I agree. It's and as I said, it's political will, because we are small, but I do believe that we have capacity, and we just have to be very intentional about doing the work. We can't get away from doing the work, and I think a lot of times that's just what it is. We just have to make up our minds and be intentional about doing the work. But I do agree that there is a disconnect there, and I see where you're coming from.
Mar? I would like to add as well. Thank you so much for the question, Diane. It's great that you're here also with us. What I can share from the experience of KIX, the KIX Hub and the work that we've been doing the last years together with the OECS Commission as well is just to mention that of course there is a main challenge when we talk about producing, mobilizing, and using evidence. As well as Valtencir was mentioning, it's very important to have the data from the country, definitely. And as you were saying, sometimes there is research and evaluations from within the country, sometimes there is not. So at the same time, we need to see how much research, evaluations, assessments we do have within the countries, but definitely we have information and evidence also in the region and the global levels. So the point that I want to highlight is that the knowing the collaboration between different organizations such as UNESCO that is here represented, the teachers unions, and also other regional or national research centers, innovation centers on education that they will be talking afterwards as well, projects that are working in the region, in the countries, together in these spaces of dialogue and other, of course, this is not the only one. We have like specific, as you know, we're working directly with Grenada these days as well. The idea is to contextualize and adapt that evidence that it's outside and also connecting with the evidence that is produced locally. And at the end, as we all know, the transformation will happen within the country, with local communities, with the teachers that are working in the local territories of Grenada and all the countries in the Eastern Caribbean in this case. But definitely working in collaboration, and that's the big step that we're doing with, at least from the KIX initiatives, like to bring evidence, to bring expertise, to bring the possibility to exchange what is happening in different countries and to learn from the comparative experiences of different countries. So maybe just to provide some possibilities of the work we're currently doing.
Muchas gracias, Raúl. Vamos a darle paso.
Thank you,
Gracias por
Raúl.
las intervenciones. Creo que
And thank you for all
calentamos
your
los ánimos
interventions.
justamente para conversar y seguir
I think that
ahondando
now
en
we
esta
are ready
discusión de
to keep
prioridades que queremos tener a
talking
continuación.
about the
Quisiera
priorities that we
detenerme
want to
brevemente
work
entonces
on.
en contarles
I
un
would
poco del
only
marco
like to
conceptual
tell you
analítico
a
que
little bit
esperamos que
about the
guíe este
conceptual
ciclo de
framework
movilización de
that we hope
conocimiento sobre
will
uso de
guide
evidencia justamente en la
this
política y práctica
knowledge
educativa que les
cycle
enviamos y que está bien descrito en la nota
that we
conceptual
send you in the
de este
conceptual
evento.
note
Básicamente,
for this
desde KIX
event.
LAC promovemos
Basically,
una
from
mirada
KIX LAC, we
sistémica
promote
sobre la
a
docencia, que bien
systemic
Valtencir
look
también
on
mencionaba y
teaching
que de alguna
that
u otra
Valtencir
forma
also
es
mentioned.
nuestro marco conceptual que nos
And this is our
acompañará
conceptual
durante
framework,
este año
which
también
will
toma
be with us
inputs
during
de
the
la
entire
Estrategia Nacional
year.
Docente.
It takes
Esto
inputs
básicamente
from
significa
the
entonces que
regional
estamos entendiendo la
teaching
política
strategy.
docente,
And
el
this means
desarrollo
that
profesional
we
docente, las condiciones de
understand
trabajo y la práctica
teaching
pedagógica no funcionan de manera
education
aislada,
and
sino que están
education
precisamente como
practices not
parte de
as
un mismo sistema que
isolate,
se
but as part
reproduce y
of a
funciona
larger
continuamente.
system
Por eso,
that
el
is
marco
constantly
analítico que nosotros
evolving.
queremos mostrarles
So the analytical framework that we want to share on the next slide, that you will see now, we are organizing it around 4 dimensions, which are spaces, or rather conversational guides, that you can see on your screens now, and that you will see also in the chat. Just 1 second. You can see it larger in the chat. And we have our first conversation, our first dimension is about regulating standards and governance for teaching practices. We talk about here all the regulations and the game, the rules for the game, which allow for financing. And this is the framework which creating possibilities and restrictions for what comes afterwards. And this framework has a direct impact on the second dimension about professionalization and teaching development. We have this continuous path, as Raúl said, articulating professional development during a teacher's career. Also, as Sharon said, there is a dialogue with this, and this policy is translated in real capacities. And when it doesn't happen, the gaps become larger and larger between what the policy says and what is really happening in schools. And this is a challenge that you have brought up constantly. So these capacities can only be fully deployed if the conditions are right for teaching. And this is another dimension that we want to talk about with you. All that is related to working conditions and valuing teaching, such as work charge, recognition, social recognition. And this is key because it has a direct influence on attracting and retaining teachers. Sharon also mentioned sustainability for any professional development policy. And finally, this comes to the 4th dimension that we also would like to invite you to analyze, and it's teaching practice. When policies and the working conditions materialize in concrete experiences in the classrooms. So I would like to talk about these dimensions. We send you a survey where we asked you precisely, according to you, what are the priorities? And among these, what is on the table today? What are the urgencies in your countries? And we did a general interpretation. Many of you said as urgent, said that one urgent topic was teaching quality and the conversation on pedagogical practice. The classroom is at the center, is the critical point. It is where the gap is more evident, the gap between policies and curriculums and teaching practices. You also mentioned the need to more contextualized focuses. You also mentioned the professionalization of teachers and professional development. You mentioned this fragmentation between programs and efforts and the lack of continuity. On the 3rd priority, we also have governance and regulations, which is a concern between regulative frameworks and implementation. And in 4th place, working conditions and valuing for teachers. And here your message is very clear. It is not possible to improve the quality of education if we cannot improve the conditions for teaching and without real value for the teaching role. Considering these dimensions, I would like to invite you to talk about this. We know that we have representatives from ministries. We would like to know what you are doing. What are your priorities in practices and policies in your countries? But we also have civil organizations civil society organizations who are generating evidence and identifying these knowledge gaps. As the Chief Education Officer from Grenada mentioned, so we invite you to open this conversation. So we hope you have brief but substantial insights. We have internally Alan Palala from the Ministry of Guatemala. Please share your priorities, the priorities of the Ministry of Education in Guatemala. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you all. We have been sharing these topics, important topics. And I want to greet all of the different representatives, groups, unions. And I share how valuable it is that you're here. I want to mention that as a Minister of Education, we have many challenges, but also 3 proposals we're working on, identifying. I guess Sharon shared something really important, relevant about how can we solve this, because we know what the problem is. So how can we solve it out? I mean, eliminating the gaps between what they learn in these training centers and what happens in the classroom, because that is the biggest problem of the curriculum. In the end, curriculums end up being what the teacher decides it to be in the classroom. But what the teacher decides in the classroom, it is conditioned by he has learned in the training center. So that's where we have those gaps. In the case of Guatemala, we have been working in many different points. One, which is within the recommendations by UNESCO, it is working in the teacher's competence framework. This is an exercise that we have been developing together with different groups, especially with universities, private and public ones in Guatemala, who are in charge of training teachers. I mean, primary school and some others of the primary and diversified, let's say high school. But the idea here is that Guatemala has a framework, a general framework of teacher skills, which is in the context of our needs. And that is the referent for the teacher's training, no matter who is providing that. Together with that, we've been working in a proposal which allows to reform what we have now for teachers' initial training. Within this, you know that in Guatemala, you study a bachelor's degree of 2 years and 3 years of university degree to become a primary school teacher. But that is something where the education of Ministry of Education has been working. So the proposal now, it is more cross-sectional, comprehensive, and I share with the last colleague about the need of this training curriculum have this teacher's accompaniment, the need of training includes being in the classroom, but for that to happen, if it means to change some legal frameworks, in some cases, and in some other cases, there's also, I mean, a financial issue for the teacher training. And together with this coincides with the exercise that we're developing of getting aligned or aligning the curriculum that we're updating with the primary curriculum, with the teachers' initial training. That is another problem. Sometimes the curriculum for teachers' training, it is on this, going on these directions, and when we expect teachers to teach, it is on a different direction. So what supervisors analyze, it is different also. So that alignment, which is a triad, it is what the ministry is trying to, is working on hard in order to, I mean, for this year to hire and rethink the profile of the supervisor and the school accompaniment. We don't have that figure, and we want to get it because teachers training or continuous training for teachers, it is highly related with the accompaniment, which is pedagogical in the classroom. So we believe that these elements are fundamental, and for the educational ministry in Guatemala, not only as a challenge, it is a challenge, but it is also a proposal, and that is something we're investing on, and we hope to have a clear roadmap in the months to come. I mean, administratively speaking, I mean, you know that this is also a challenge, which is related to funds, paperwork, and even though we want the ones who are here on this side of the field, I mean, we are teachers. We have been in public schools. We're coming from that realm where, of course, all of the situations occur. When you are a decision maker, everything must be under legal framework. And those are the elements which for us are so important. And I'm finished by saying something which is so relevant. Within or the summary also included, which is making teachers a dignified profession. This is a key element in order to recruit more teachers. So they want to become teachers. And that's a collective work. When I say collective, not only here in Guatemala, but the different institutions which are participating here. Because there are, we have identified this situation in different surveys and polls. There are fewer students. There's fewer students saying that what they want to study at university, it is teaching. They don't want to be teachers. So there's a combination of dignification and acknowledgement of the exercise of teacher, the work of teachers, which is not only related to money. In this moment, we're also talking about social elements and key elements which are important to provide teachers the space they deserve in society. Thank you for your intervention and also for mentioning and talking about the challenges in Guatemala. They're also similar to the Western Caribbean situation. I want to invite, I don't know, I'm going to open the floor for comments. Maybe people willing to, I don't know, talk about similar challenges. I mean, just open your mic and take the floor. We'll also invite, we have one question over here. Nelsie, you're most welcome. The floor is yours.
Nelsie, por favor, presentarte y bueno.
Can you introduce yourself?
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
¿Ustedes me ven a mí o no me ven a mí?
Can you see me?
No te vemos.
We cannot see
ya.
you.
Sí, me pareció que no me podían ver. Bueno, ni modo.
Well, anyways, I am Nelsie Lizarazo. I'm the general coordinator of the Latin American campaign for the right for education. And we are leading together with ONET this forum in Honduras and the collective in Guatemala. This is a project for scaling education model, I mean, inclusive and communitarian for first infancy. So, let's say that learning in the process are so many, and they're related to teachers training. And not only that, but nevertheless, I would like to highlight two elements which are highly related with the axis, the pillars I have mentioned, but also with our experience in the end. First of all, the first one is connected to the concept of educational quality, which is not mentioned oftentimes, and in our experience, it is a relevant factor for learning and different learnings. And we're talking about the atmosphere in the classroom. That is to say, how our teachers, both men and women, get to create an atmosphere of trust, of peace, without any pressure, and an atmosphere which enables participation, the expression of children, and it also promotes learning. So this, in our process, this is a key element, and we have evidence about it. So that is something that we're thinking not so much, but our teachers, they do need tools in order to set learning atmospheres which enable learning. So that is one element. And the other one that I want to highlight over here is this famous learning by doing. That assumes, in terms of public policies, accompaniment in the different territories. Our teachers, they do need to be accompanied, pedagogically speaking, not just to be controlled in what they're doing, but they should be accompanied, pedagogically speaking, in order so they feel more trust and more secure about what they're doing. We believe that is so relevant, and that's what we have done. And it is proven that that works quite well. It accelerates learning in teachers. So I wanted to share that with you. We believe that right there, we can accelerate some achievements. It assumes, as it was already mentioned some minutes ago, it assumes political will, investment. There's no other possibility in that case. So that creates tension, we know that, but we should solve it, because without that, it's going to be too hard to develop this type of processes of learning for our teachers. Because not only our children are learning, our teachers are also learning. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Nelsie. Marina, there are some observations about that conversation about accompaniment, teacher's accompaniment. Marina, the floor is yours. Later, Erica, the floor will be yours also.
Hola, ahora sí se escucha.
Oh, okay, there you are. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. It is nice to listen to all of these voices. I was also talking in the chat box with Nelson, and I coincide with what has been said about the political will and the creation of material conditions, which is the very base for any transformational or transformation process is achieved. Nevertheless, it is not the only condition, and I want to contribute with the experience that IPE is developing in the accompanying process of in the Ministry of Education, implementation of policies, and we have called them effective policies, those which obtain goals for the ones they were created for. I coincide with the colleague over here saying that somehow we all know which are the educational goals. We're clear what our goal is. In this context, current context, I don't know, it makes us wonder where we're going to or heading to. But we have our framework of the right-up education as a framework which is mandatory. It must be warranted in terms of quality and equality. So what we're observing from IPE, not only from research, but also from the accompaniment, practical accompaniment to the different ministries, we have seen that the work with what we have called these intermediate agents of the educational system, it is a key element for obtaining the educational goals related to policies. Intermediate levels, which are they? This is one of the main difficulties. The definition of that big or huge space between the higher level of political decision-making towards schools. According to the organizational systems, the cultural systems, those levels are more complex. They are simpler, and sometimes there are some roles. Sometimes there are not. So creating from policies, some regulations to clarify the functions of these agents in the task of accompaniment, because oftentimes they were aimed to do some control or assessing things, supervisor, inspector image. And little by little, it is seen the need that their activities should be strengthened for supporting pedagogically to schools. So there's a key element here. Which capacities do we have or capabilities? IP, from its mandate, has identified which are those capabilities of accompaniment which get to obtain the need of the different territories. Because in this phase of the policy definitions on the classroom, there are many different translations, reinterpretations of the different policies, and sometimes involuntarily, the goals are changed. So we do need these areas which are the guardians of the sense of the policies, the goal of them. So they create different conditions in different territories. So they create these accompaniment systems. So schools do not feel that they're always responsible for results, educational results to be obtained. That is too much pressure over teachers and over schools and their leaders. See, for instance, the results of the different assessments of learning, the quality of education assessment. And sometimes there's a gap which is so big. So what we have to do in order to shorten the gap, it is strengthening the work with these intimate spaces in their support capabilities at institutional pedagogical level. Thank you. Thank you. Erica, the floor is yours.
Hola, hola, ¿me escuchan?
Claro que sí, Erika. Un gusto
Can you hear me?
tenerte por acá.
Yes, pleasure to have you over here. Thank you. It is my pleasure. Greetings for everyone. I want to thank for this invitation in this important space, talking about priority, pedagogical practices, and quality of education. Erica Alvarar, over here, we're within the project, KIX project with LDRC, from GPE and SUMMA, working together from this project scaling and learning model through games for early education in El Salvador. I wanted to say that alongside this line, as part of our project of moving knowledge, creating evidence, I mean, this is a contribution for the reflection, different analysis in these spaces of the local group of education, with some other actors also. In this framework, we have developed a research about the diagnosis, about the inclusion of first infancy in the educational offer of the educational institution in the country. I want to tell you, because there's a gap, there's a challenge here about this pedagogical practice versus the quality of learning. So we have put at the table this research, which was developed at a national level. We asked 8 universities in the country also in order to analyze this offer, educational offer, because we do know that the reality and the needs, current needs versus the offer of the curriculum in the country, it is sometimes they're having a gap. They're not highly connected. So we did this consultation with specialists of the bachelors in nursery school, professors of primary school, and motherhood, which is highly connected to the teacher's training. We also asked for different departments in the country. And I want to tell you that this document wanted to characterize the educational offer available in all of the different higher education institutions, training teachers related to first infancy. So we're talking about initial education, and I want to share part of these findings in general, which are coming from this document, which is also available. If you want to have it, we can share with you all. The academic offer, it is centered with limited opportunities of specialization. 36.5% of programs correspond to teachers and 36 0.5% to different bachelors, 17% are master's degree, and 6.8 are diplomas. 84% of the careers are in person with low coverage. We also have the need of updating the curriculum. El Salvador, on Saturday, we're going to share the new curriculum through the Ministry of Education. It's going to be an updated version. And last year, we had this need of updating this curriculum and including topics of neuroeducation and the importance of the right to play. So another finding, it is the teacher's profile with a robust training. It is so necessary. It is necessary to strengthen this initial education with different specialties. We know there are many teachers in the classroom which are trained as teachers, but they do not have any specialization in first infancy. There's also another finding, which is the revalorization of playing as a pedagogical pillar. This is a priority axis. 6% of the ones asked specialists believe that it is a key element for children. So it is acknowledged in this research the importance of the right to play and how this tool is going to boost learning. There's another finding, which is the need of having resources, infrastructure, technological infrastructure, which is so important nowadays. These minimum conditions and resources are so necessary. Job insertion. 83.3% of universities have some agreements for practices and working in an articulated fashion, having efforts in this topic related to training. At a recommendation level, key recommendations, we highlight that diversifying the academic offer is so relevant, and it should be done through different ways. In the research, post-degree diplomas, having more hybrid modalities, virtual modalities, decentralized ones, and also strengthening the practice, investing resources in tier laboratories, innovative materials, promoting continuous training of teachers, and boosting also research and initial training. This study has been shared in different tables and spaces with different institutions, government, experts in this field and topic, just to serve and to analyze the different policies. There are challenges that we're having as a country, different findings, and we're sharing this with you all. So these are my comments, and thank you very much for inviting me. Congratulations for this effort.
Thank you very much, Erica. We really value the visibility of research work from the territories, and your work is a show of that. So thank you very much for these inputs. We will continue to share the findings of your research. Now I want to look a little bit to the Caribbean. We have Diane here. Maybe she has a question or an intervention. Maybe she can share a little bit about the priorities of the interventions in Granada. And then we will continue with other projects implementing the Caribbean. So Diane, the floor is yours. We're listening to you.
Good afternoon again. I just wanted to add another perspective to the discussion of the professional development. Just to state that the well-being of teachers must also be considered, even if together with the professional development, because a real situation for us. We've had crisis after crisis in the region, where we have to go through a lot of recovery cycles, and our teachers sometimes feel very overwhelmed. So though they are well trained, some of them will be well trained. They have attended a number of professional development sessions. They have certification in teacher education and all of that. But when they have to deal with the crisis after, it becomes very difficult. So in all our planning and ensuring that We provide professional development for our teachers. We also have to not just consider the type of professional development and the frequency of the professional development, but we also have to consider that we must look after the teachers' well-being. So we have to look at their working condition, and maybe some of the professional development could actually deal with well-being of teachers. But at the same time, we also have to look at the infrastructure that is provided for the teachers' conditions that they're working under, the pay that they're receiving, and all of that. So I just wanted to add this perspective to the professionalization of teachers.
Muchísimas gracias, Diane, por traer esto, la profesionalización docente.
Thank you very much, Diane, for bringing professionalization to the table. These topics related to well-being, I would like to talk about this a little bit later, because I know that many of the assistants here also want to prioritize this topic. Now I want to give the floor to Yvette Antoine. Are you with us?
Yvette? Yes.
Yvette?
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. Our research is being done in St. Vincent and Grenadines and St. Lucia and Dominica. It is referred as the Full Potential Project. Our research is concerned with the persistent and widening gap in the educational achievement between boys and girls. Our data collection with students showed that even young children perceive differences in how boys and girls are treated at school. Both boys and girls, for example, said that boys were more quickly to be punished and more strictly punished than girls. This suggests that the norms educators have about the expected behavior and abilities of boys and girls is influencing how they react or interact with children. And we should clarify that by gender norms, we aren't talking about sexuality. We are talking about the expectations communities have about boys and girls. For example, that boys have a hard time focusing and should not express emotions. We say sometimes boys should not cry, etc. And we say also that girls are quiet and gentle and more diligent in their schoolwork. That came out from the research. Teachers who had an opportunity to learn about gender norms were able to reflect on how normative views influence teaching and classroom management practices. These teachers are also changing how they interact with students in their classes. Now they are more aware of the potential impact of norms. And these concepts need to be included in teacher training programs, and school leaders need to monitor the school environment for gender normative practices. In addition, teachers participating in our innovation activities have used their professional knowledge to develop new solutions in addressing teaching and learning challenges in their school. Teachers have the knowledge to think deeply about their students and help solve challenges in education system, but we believe they are not always included in school improvement discussions. That's it for me. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Yvette. Bien interesante.
Thank you very much, Yvette. This is a very interesting connection that you show, especially with the teacher training today in many of our countries. including the gender perspective and new masculinities. This is a challenge in many of our countries. And linking this to teacher training is very interesting. I would like to come back to well-being and teacher professionalization, which the Granada team brought up. Maybe someone has a comment about this or a country that has this discussion on their agenda today. Any comments, initiatives that are being implemented?
Víctor, lo escuchamos.
Victor, you have the floor. Yes, thank you very much. In the project that we are currently carrying out in Guatemala, we have established that this year, 2026, we're going to carry a survey with the ministry authorities to see how we can reinforce what we have mentioned, which is supporting teachers who have just come out of the university. Preschool teachers, which are at the end of their teacher training, as we have mentioned, they only have theoretical knowledge. So what we will try to do in this practice, we need authorization from the ministry, of course, for this. But we would also like to share this with teachers in their work in order to bring this experience to every classroom, and in this case, to every student, so that they can have it before they go into their teaching practice. And this is the idea we're working on today. And we hope that in a near future, we would be able to share how we did with this experience. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Victor. Now, Alan. Yes, I would like to take the opportunity to invite Victor to work with us. We would love to know what you are working on, and also mention you that this is a topic that we identified. And since last year, the Ministry of Education is sharing curricula and sharing teacher training to the teachers who are in charge of teaching practices, just what you mentioned. So congratulations. I am glad that we can work together on this initiative. And we invite you to have a more in-depth talk about this. Thank you for bringing this up. I'm so happy that there is this connection between you. This is exactly the purpose of these spaces. I would like to close this part of the conversation. We have some observations from the Ministry of Education of Guyana. We have some representatives of the University of Guyana, and we would like to hear from you if they are present, so that we can listen and understand the challenges of the country today. So, Delicia, we know that you from the university have been working on several research related to teacher training. Would you like to share something about this? If you can hear us?
Yes, can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Good afternoon again, everyone. And from the university, I must say that we have been working assiduously with our partners, specifically the Ministry of Education, Sargusingh-Terrance College of Education, to enhance and ensure that teacher training improves. But a critical challenge that we recognize that we're currently working on is the implementation gap. And we believe that this is caused by a misalignment between general research findings, some policy mandates, also contextually the tacit knowledge that is required for classroom practice. And what I mean by this gap means that even when scientifically sound research is shared, these evidence-based research exists, it often fails to improve student outcomes because these very policies that are derived or it's derived from, it's not evident within the everyday realities of classrooms. And stemming off of Ms. Sharon's input when she mentioned that sometimes we recognize that teachers, there's a high turnover rate. We have lots of new teachers, or what we would term newbies, in our systems, and they have to be mentored, they have to be trained. And many of our seasoned teachers, educators, they would have left due to brain drain. So we find that struggle in persons trying to implement and continue along that line. And it also creates a vacuum where there is what we would say a lack of knowledge or the knowledge brokering, where persons who would have been experienced, persons who have the knowledge to share and disseminate and help and support the younger or junior teachers as they work with children. So we do recognize that we have lots of research coming on board, lots of information, scientific evidence that is being shared, but it is more of the gap, the transformation of linking or bridging from the information, the research findings to the classroom. So teachers are forced to bridge this gap themselves many a times and this often results in sometimes due to heavy workloads. Sometimes, again, we have teachers who are not in classrooms. So these are just some of the challenges that we experience, and we're working assiduously to resolve that. I will just share that snippet for now. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Delicia.
Thank you very much, Delicia. For us, it is very important what you mentioned precisely, how we build evidence in the classrooms, how we build practices that can inform policy, and how we can close these gaps generated between research and university and the pedagogical challenges in the classrooms. So I would like now to close this space so we can bring to the end this first webinar. This is an initial conversation. What we're doing here is taking input from this diversity of voices, teacher unions, universities, ministries of education, the civil society, but this will keep going. I would like to invite Valtencir and Sharon to share an idea, this flavor you have after this conversation that we've had today, and we can then move on to the next session, to the next moment of the session. Thank you very much, Mar. What I take from this is that there is a need to work together and to share this evidence and these practices, but also the diagnosis, right? Because we know that there is evidence, because just as someone said here, and often we don't see this evidence, which is generated in local contexts, and it's very really related to what happens in every reality. But when we go to the practice, there is a gap in what is happening in terms of policy programs in many of our countries. So there is this distance between what evidence can bring to the table and what is being actually implemented. So I would like to come back to something I mentioned at the beginning today, and that is the key is implementation, how we implement this knowledge. And this has to be done through a very collaborative process that involves the entire ecosystem of a country. In our case, for instance, we take a framework strategy, and we land all this in a diagnostics tool, which serves as an excuse to have a dialogue with the entire ecosystem of the country, obviously this led by the Ministry of Education of said country. But seeing this as a tool which helps us to look at this framework and this strategy so that we can detect the level of maturity or the level of needs that each jurisdiction and each context has. And we can do this taking into account all the different elements that we have mentioned today: professionalization and initial teacher training, elements from well-being, health. I think that sometimes as human, we tend to look for easy solutions for complex topics because educational topics are very complex, and each of our countries is its own world. And this is why we need to inspire and have the evidence from these regional frameworks, but really do an individual exercise in each of our contexts within our region. And with this ecosystem, having teachers really in this key position to co-build politics and strategies at the national level. And with the organizations present today here, also bringing their support. But who has to be in the driving seat? It's the Ministry of Education and its main actors in each country. But I leave this session with the hope that collaboration is possible, and I remain available to continue this dialogue and this building of what we need so dearly, which is an improvement in our region. Sharon, now you have the floor.
Thank you. I agree much of what Valtencir said, and I think to wrap up, there was a question that was asked by Hector, and we didn't get to address it, but I just wanted to. I think it's important in wrapping up to address what he asked. He basically asked what would we suggest, when it comes to governments. You have governments that are politicians who are politicians of a government and not of the state. And, every government is going to come in with their own agenda of what they think education should look like, what they think the various ministries should look like. And this is where, and this is why I talk about political will a lot, because this is where our technicians come in. This is where our teachers come in. This is where our parent teacher organizations come into play, because the politicians on their own cannot effect change. They can suggest, but they cannot effect change on their own. And it's a network of stakeholders who have to come together, including the technicians within the Ministry of Education, including the teachers. Our leaders within our schools have to be effective in leading our teachers. So it takes a network to really push our education systems forward. And if we don't get that network correct, then we are going to be stuck where we are now. And so it's important that we have the conversations that we're having now, but it's even more important that these conversations move beyond the Zoom meeting and beyond our offices to implementation. As Valtencir says, it comes down to implementation, and there has to be political will for implementation. Because as he said, sometimes we look for an easy answer to very complex issues. And it is not an easy answer. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of speaking to some new teachers who just come into the government system. And one of the things I said to them is, you have to understand your why. Why did you become a teacher? Because teaching is not easy, and you will never get just how much you put out. You're always going to put out more than what you're getting. And so you have to understand your why. And so if we do not have the political will within our various stakeholder groups, if we don't have that political will to drive change, even when it's difficult, then we're going to be stuck. So I think that is so important. I see that we are all doing different projects and we can learn from each other, We can take from each other the things that might work in our systems, but we have to move the conversation beyond our meetings and really work towards implementation. That's where it is.
Muchísimas gracias, Sharon. Efectivamente, se nos plantean
Thank you
muchas
very
preguntas,
much,
muchos desafíos, pero
Sharon.
también tenemos que tener la certeza
We
de que
have
hay avances que se han
shared
realizado, que hay agendas de trabajo muy
there are
concretas.
many things that have been done today and concrete agendas. And so now I want to invite Dante Castillo, who is our Policy and Innovative Director from SUMMA. He's going to share a little about how SUMMA has been answering this. And we also have Lisa Sargusingh, which is a senior technical specialist from the OECS, who is going to tell us how they're answering these challenges. Dante, welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mar. Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. So, I want to tell you about some ideas which I believe are so powerful and critical about the situation, teacher situation. And I want to catch up and start my comment with the expression that Sharon used at the beginning, this crossroad. In Spanish, we would say encrucijada, the crossroad where we're at in this teacher situation. And this crossroad, it is highly complex, difficult to solve, different actors, dimensions. And what Valtencir also mentioned, and what has been said, that means collaborative work, coordination of efforts, identifying different critics. It means it requires a dialogue, conversation between players, actors who are building this legitimacy for this reform. So maybe this crossroad has to do with the new demands, social demands, new expectations of society towards teachers and what we expect teachers to do and achieve in their classrooms. New technological environments, it's been mentioned, new social and cultural environments, which somehow arise from classrooms due to the migration effect sometimes, human mobility, so on and so forth. So right there, there's a challenge and a crossroad that needs to be solved, because we may say we need to, I don't know, close the circle, and that's hard. It requires not only goodwill but good ideas, and the exercise that starts with this cycle of moving knowledge and evidence is how we can identify those good ideas. So I want to highlight two things. Some of the ideas that rose from these former conversations and former presentations, and commenting about some projects where we have been working as SUMMA, which could give some hints into this debate, learnings, hints, findings that we've been working as an organization for this last year. We have seen, I mean, some things are working okay on how we can advance on these different agendas. There are some strategies in order to move the system and trying to solve this crossroad, which is the one we are facing. So I have two big main ideas about what has been mentioned already. This idea of, this is a key element. Alan, Nelsie, Delicia also talked about this. This idea of this space between what is taught, theory, and practice, knowledge itself. There is a core space for debate, which we should keep on developing on how we can reduce that gap. Reducing it in the sense of how teachers, in their repertories of work, of skills and competences, are going to solve these challenges, which are set by these diverse classrooms. When we say there are new challenges, when we mention what's there at the classroom, well, those are spaces which are so diverse, culturally speaking. When talking about languages, automatically, gender relationships are diverse also. Motivations and interests of students, where teachers are facing all of those different realities at the same time. And they need to take charge of those realities. So there's a core issue which is going to accompany them, which was shown in what Mar just mentioned, in this idea of pedagogical practice and teaching, quality teaching. So the question and that dimension and pillar, it is a key pillar or axis. It is acknowledged by all of the ones who have commented in this meeting. So dynamics and strategy solutions of accompaniment are key elements. How to provide resources for the classroom, for the teacher's work also. How we develop environments, organizational environments in the school, at the school, which are appropriate so the teacher or teachers can do their work, pedagogical work. So those create implications which are going to aim in different directions. Accompaniment systems, supervision systems, or pedagogical accompaniment, they're aiming to institutional conditions of acknowledging the teacher's profession, so on and so forth. But there's a core element, which I think, which is the very core of the debate, the accompaniment, and focusing in the work being done by teachers. So that's a key element. The second key element, it is an immediate result that has to do with the professionalization and the professional development of teachers. If we analyze the region, Latin America, probably systems for initial training are more institutionalized and coordinated than the ones for professional and continuous training systems. There are two realities there. We're talking about education, motivation, how systems are thought, born, and there's a huge challenge there about training in terms of how we can, LATAM countries and the Caribbean, how we can build professional backgrounds which are connected. We have been working on this idea for quite a long time. How to connect initial training with continuous training. So one challenge, to take charge of what the UNESCO report said, there's a scarcity of teachers. It says we need more than 3 million teachers, but we need to take charge of the 7 million teachers who are already in the classrooms. And those 7 millions in the classroom probably will need to go through some training processes, continuous training processes. So how can we provide that in coherence with those demands and those needs which are arising in the system? So I believe that what Erica said and the contribution from their different experiences and realities of the countries that they're working at are fundamental elements. So that's what I wanted to highlight, these two elements. Pedagogical interaction, let's call it that way, should be at the very core, the pedagogical core by Elmore, and the coherence and the background in training. Those are two hints which we should follow during this moving period of evidence. From SUMMA, I would say that we can complement those two hints with some of the works we have done. Let's go to our next slide. I will briefly cover this slide. I believe that there are some hints related to how we work from research. We find things, we offer evidence from applied research and assessment of implementations, innovations, and projects, concrete projects. We contribute from the synthesis of evidence. This is something that we've been working since the very beginning as an organization, and KIX LAC has included in the evidence creation. We apply science on the things that we do know that work. Trying new models. We're at an age and an era where we need to innovate. We need to try new ideas, test new ideas, and we should take that into, or they should turn into solutions for systems. So I want to tell you about 3 or 4 projects which could contribute to this conversation. We're working at a project with OXD to identify pedagogical practices which are highly effective. This is something we've been doing with other organizations such as Educational Endowment Foundation, which has been working this toolkit of practices and synthesis of evidence of those practices which work. How do we know? There are pedagogical practice and model methodologies being used by teachers, which are developing, with having better possibilities to improve learning. That is a key element. Which are those? We use the ones we know, or let's try to play and explode somehow those practices, pedagogical practices that we do know they're effective and that may have a differential performance when implementing metacognition, feedback of teachers, collaborative work. So there are some hints from which we can start and not to start from scratch. So we're working on that project with OCD in this teaching of high quality. I would say that an important element we got to some learnings, it is the survey we did during the pandemic, after pandemic, the teacher's voice. What we realized is that there were insufficiencies, serious lack of pedagogical support, teachers' well-being, and good conditions for teaching were not there. So it echoes what we are talking about here on how we build systems of support which are integrated and coherent for teachers. When we say integrated and coherent, not only offering one dimension with a contradiction in a different dimension. So how do we include accountability also in order to different public instruments also create coherence and not tensions or conflicts? So there's a key, important hint there. We also have been working, we have worked strongly with WUI project, University of Wood, which its mission is supporting the strengthening of initial training for teachers. So that project that focus in initial training operated with the premises that we've been talking about. Many of them have appeared, have been shown in this workshop or in this seminar, which has to do with how can we think those competence frameworks, good teaching, good practices, teaching practices, how most of those practices can adapt and are in a context, are contextualized to the situation, local situation, in the Caribbean, for instance. So a basic thing, a fundamental thing of that project that has been successful and is under implementation has to do with the collaborative work and with a concept which I think it is key in collaboration, which how to assure legitimacy, credibility, legitimacy in the decision, and probably legitimization of any decision is got by working together. Finally, we're working at a project which we have called this Empowering Teachers Initiative. What it wants, it is understanding how to advance in more equality models, continuous training. So that's why training, it is a key element in the connection with initial training and continuous training. Thinking in those models of teachers training that can be scalable in the system. So the whole logic and expectation is to scale things up. Teacher training of good quality. So, summarizing, I would say that I believe that there is a fundamental thing here. We should place at the very core, next slide, we need to put at the very center or core of everything, the classroom. This classroom must be at the very core. The pedagogical nuclei on how to build an institutionality. I believe that a colleague said this, translations, interpretations, policies, and its translation into the classroom. We may say there are some interpretations which are descending and some other ones are going upwards. That is to say, from the classroom, we need to rethink politics which are focusing in the classroom. And finally, how are we strengthening these spaces? Multiple strategies thinking on how to strengthen that core, pedagogical core. So from SUMMA, my last ideas are a contribution to this space. How we're creating those bridges between global research, evidence, and practices, and the implementation of programs in LATAM. How we are connecting the different levels. And I said this in a descending and ascending part, from practice policies and policies to policy, in such a way that we concentrate or focus in that translation, but above all, thinking in this space of work in the classroom between teachers and students, contributing to a learning to be measured, but also for a comprehensive development. And of course, having as a main focus the big challenges that we're having in LATAM, which are learning gaps, inequalities, inequities, and how how educational systems offer opportunities of good quality in an equalitarian manner for all of the students. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Dante. I want to give the floor to Lisa. She's going to tell us about these answers, response that OECS is having in the Western Caribbean. You're most welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ma. Just let me know if you could see my slides.
We can see.
Okay. All right. Just making sure that I can navigate to the next. Okay, thank you so much. It has been an interesting 2 hours just listening to colleagues from Latin America and the Caribbean share on everything as it pertains to teacher quality, teacher professional development. I'm hoping that through my presentation, as I represent the OECS Commission, that you would appreciate the lessons learned that we will be sharing with you as it pertains to teacher professional development. In our English-speaking OECS countries. Teacher quality for us is not treated as a standalone issue. It is actually embedded within our education sector strategy, which sets out 7 strategic priorities for system transformation. 2 of these imperatives relate directly to teaching, with a central focus on improving teachers' professional development. This is important because it means that our work on teacher policy and practice is not project-driven. It is anchored in a long-term regional strategy endorsed by Minister of Education and designed to deliver a measurable system outcomes. Just let me know if you can see the next slide as I shift. Okay. So the OECS Education Sector Strategy 2012 to 2026 is very explicit about how success in teacher professional development is measured. First, we track the share of qualified teaching staff across schools and colleges in the OECS. Second, we monitor the percentage increase in qualified teachers working in their areas of expertise, because qualifications only matter if they are effectively deployed. Third, we measure progress through the establishment of teacher professional standards, which provide a common reference point for what teachers are expected to know and be able to do across the region. Together, these 3 indicators allow us to assess not only workforce capacity, but also coherence and quality at system level, and they guide how evidence is used to inform policy decisions and professional development priorities. When we look at the data across early childhood, primary, and secondary education, We actually see steady progress in the proportion of trained teachers. The data on teacher qualification, as you can see here, reveals an important pattern though. At the primary level, most teachers are professionally trained, though many of them do not hold degrees. At the secondary level, the opposite is true. Many teachers are graduates, but a significant proportion lack formal professional training. This highlights for us a critical system challenge. Teacher quality depends not only on academic qualifications, but on professional preparation and ongoing development aligned to classroom practice. Now, in response to these challenges, the OECS has focused on building a structured, system-wide approach to professional development. Some of you here would be quite aware of our OECS professional development model as you are connected to your various ministries and teachers' colleges. This PD model, developed in 2019 by a group of educators across the OECS, was designed to operationalize the strategic imperative of teacher professional development. It is teacher-centered, it is job-embedded, it is differentiated, cost-effective, and quite sustainable. And this also came actually out of a need for us to move away from what had been a traditional workshop approach to building our teachers professionally. Okay? Together, this model and platform help move professional development from a fragmented set of activities to a coherent system. I think I may have mentioned that it was endorsed at the highest levels. And Sister Sharon from the CUT, it has been endorsed by the CUT and our Council of Ministers of Education, likewise the Eastern Caribbean Joint Board of Teacher Education. That PD model evolved eventually into what we call the MyPD platform. It's a platform with a host of modules for our teachers, our leaders, all groups of education professionals, where they can access a set of modules related to the curriculum that is being developed for the primary school and all other areas as being identified in an assessment that was carried out. So the modules that are there are not just arbitrary. They are categorized into various groupings for the various groups of educational stakeholders. And to date, we have over 1,000 educators who have engaged, who have been engaged with the MyPD program, being exposed to the basics in child-centered learning. Close to 300 have participated in early childhood education training and 51 in special education needs training. Here you will just have a view of what that dashboard looks like, which is also in development. Now, importantly, I want to share with us what are the lessons that we have learned so far as we focus on teacher professional development. One of our most important lessons is that high-quality teaching is not solely about individual teacher skill. Factors such as curriculum design, classroom conditions, and the wider school climate, they strongly influence what our teachers can realistically enact at the classroom level. Because even well-trained teachers, you would know, they struggle to apply effective practices if the system does not support them. This learning directly informed our OECS investment in the OECS, the digital OECS harmonized primary curriculum. This curriculum, it provides coherence, harmonization for us across our member states. It provides clarity, consistency throughout our member states. It is a curriculum that goes hand in hand with teacher professional development. And of course, designed by our teachers, created by our teachers. Again, I heard the talk of sometimes teachers not fully implementing, experiencing burnout and all of these things and not owning these things. At the OECS, we understand that teachers have to be co-creators, and the development of the digital OECS primary curriculum is a strong example of how our region, our educators, our teachers have been part of this process. And a second lesson is that curriculum reform, as I said, and teacher professional development must move hand in hand. And here it is just giving you a little view again of what some extracts of our digital primary curriculum looks like. Of course, I know some of you are have been engaged with it and have been very active contributors to that. An important lesson for us again, as we develop our teachers, is that there is a critical role of school leadership in enabling high quality teaching. Our school leaders, our principals, they shape the instructional focus, they create conditions for collaboration, and they influence how professional development is taken up at the school level. Through the leadership program developed in partnership with the University of the West Indies, we had about 115 school leaders certified in strengthening institutional capacity across the region. We need to acknowledge that without strong instructional leadership, even well-designed reforms will struggle to take hold. Here is another lesson that we have learned, and it is high-quality teaching depends on access to diverse and appropriate resources. Teachers need a mix of high-tech, low-tech, open resources that can be adapted to different contexts, including low connectivity, no connectivity. I heard the story of Antigua and their struggle as they speak about connectivity, and even crisis-prone environments, as the COVID pandemic taught us. Our teachers need all these types of resources, okay? The OECS initiatives in digital education and curriculum innovation, open resource approaches, and foundational learning programs like the Early Learners Program and the Right to Read all reflect an understanding of that. These efforts position resources as pedagogical enablers rather than static content. And I think our data shows that we have been able to produce over 1,600 curriculum lessons, digital units, coming out of one of our projects called the DESI. Another important lesson for us is that teachers are important knowledge producers. Okay? When teachers are actually supported to adapt and to create and to actually share resources, relevance increases and their professional identity is strengthened. And for this reason, the OECS continues to ensure that even in the development of resources, that our teachers are the ones leading that charge. Right now, we are very proud to have a set of books, I mentioned earlier, the Right to Read books that have been published written by our teachers, written by our students, as well as the over 1,600 curriculum units that have been written by our teachers, produced by our teachers. And if they do it themselves, understandably, they will appreciate it because our teachers very long have complained about resources that sometimes do not match our context. Pictures in books that don't look like our children. Okay, so through our work and on behalf of the Ministries of Education, we have ensured that our teachers are the ones producing that knowledge. We are making some strides there and we will continue to do so. From one of our important studies on teacher supply and demand. The analysis shows us that qualifications alone, again, are not enough, and that subject-specific shortages and misalignment between teacher qualifications and what they are assigned to continue to limit the impact of professional development investments. Improving teacher quality, therefore, requires attention to deployment, targeted support, and leadership capacity at the school level. And this reinforces the importance of viewing teacher policy as a system rather than a set of isolated interventions. In terms of professionalization, and I think I heard reference to that throughout the previous presentations, the OECS is taking a cautious learning-based approach. There is work already underway in one of our member states, St. Kitts and Nevis, where they are working to establish a teaching council as part of professionalizing the teaching service. It's a national initiative, and other countries, the entire region, we are observing and learning for possible adaptation. At the regional level, at the OECS level, our role is to support coherence, to support harmonization, to facilitate that learning, and to avoid any premature positioning while consensus continues to develop. So we are looking at the whole notion of professionalizing the teaching service, but again, learning from the example of our member states, St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, having shared some of these lessons as we develop our teachers in the region and the various approaches that we take, I just want to leave a few takeaways for our KIX community. Okay, first of all, strategy-anchored success indicators, they sharpen reform and they focus decision-making. Second, high-quality teaching is a system outcome, not an individual effort. Third, curriculum, leadership, professional development, and resources must be aligned to achieve sustained impact. The OECS experience shows that high-quality teaching is produced by systems that intentionally connect strategy, evidence, and practice. I thank you for your time. I thank you for allowing me to share on these lessons. And even before I make my exit, I want to just make a pitch and inform this community that the OECS right now is leading on a major regional student census, which is going to be a treasure trove of data for all of us. UNESCO, KIX, CUT, the various ministries of education, SUMMA. To date, in fact, right now, 57,000 students in the OECS have already completed that survey. Our K-2 students, our grades 3 to 6, and our Form 1s to Form 5s. This is a survey that goes from grade K right to Form 5, and it is going to give us powerful data that will also inform how we improve that space of teacher professional development. So look out for the findings when they are made available, and look forward also for us launching a teacher census again that will give us another set of rich data on the directions that we should move as a region. Thank you so much, everyone.
Muchísimas gracias, Lisa. Como siempre, es un gusto escucharte y saber efectivamente el gran
Thank you very
esfuerzo
much, Lisa. It's always a pleasure to hear you and to learn the strength and the efforts of the OECS for the region. I would also like to tell the audience that even if these countries are on the other side from Central America, of course, they're available to connect conversations and challenges. Please be comfortable, get to learn about their experiences. That being said, I want to leave the last section of our session today to a very brief but key presentation because it's one of the priority projects that we will implement with KIX during 2026. María José, I leave you the floor, and thank you very much for joining this space. Thank you, Mar, and thank you, everyone. It has been a great space to exchange and get to know more about the reality of Central America and Caribbean countries. I would like to thank for this space and take the opportunity to share this initiative, which is in dialogue with the topic, and it's called Dialoga, Dialogue. Some of the participants and presenters today, as they have mentioned, this is an initiative which offers a way to keep building, and it requires an articulation between recommendations and global and local evidence, technical expertise at the ministry level.
Pasamos a la siguiente.
Next slide, please.
¿Qué lo que es esta? No, disculpa, la anterior.
Sorry, the previous slide. So, what is this initiative? It's a regional initiative led by SUMMA with KIX LAC, and it seeks to strengthen something very concrete: how educational systems identify their priorities, work with available evidence, and make informed decisions. Dialoga is not a traditional research project, but rather a regional space where we can work together to improve the use of evidence for learning decisions. Why is this project necessary? I think many of us have mentioned this today, and we share our common diagnostic. We have evidence available today, but it's not always easy to use. Many times it is scattered or comes from different contexts, or we don't know necessarily how to articulate it. Or maybe the policy timelines do not allow to carry out large readings and reviews. So in this context, we want to really drive this initiative, which seeks to prioritize and synthesize and use this available information so that we can take advantage of different learnings in order to take decisions in our countries. Why is the evidence in the center? As we have said, the idea is to take advantage of the work in community, using it at a bridge between research and policy. And we know that there is an important gap here. Many of you have mentioned it today. But if we do this together, we can use these different knowledge and experiences. So what we try to strengthen here is that this initiative looks that evidence and decision and have a dialogue. And in this logic, we want to work on three key aspects. First, a priority agenda built from the countries, built with key stakeholders through a regional survey, which allow us to really build on what are these priorities and urgencies in order to build a regional agenda. And through this, we want to really answer the question of what are the problems that countries face and which of them are urgent. Then the second lever is to establish and identify the different teaching gaps, what we can consider, what is the evidence existing, using regional and global synthesis, using the evidence that you shared with us today, in order to work in shared minima that would allow us to share together, working with the ministries and the teachers and the academia to formulate policy questions and use these questions so that they can be translated into implementations and guidelines which are more precise. So what we say here is that we can learn within pairs so that we can take decisions together. Next slide, please.
The working strategy here is that we can, from an element which is going to be a regional survey, to have information from the practice community, so we can work all together, strengthening, in order to strengthen the relationship between players, technicians, ministry actors, to strengthen the processes to work with evidence and setting all together some shared minimal elements related to traceability. We want to minimize the duplication of effort. We want to have findings at a regional level, which can also be useful in order to have these guidelines, minimal regional guidelines, in order to align in a better way what we know and what we don't know and where we need to work harder. I'm going to present. I will anticipate that you're going to find more information of this initiative and project at the SUMMA webpage. But if we continue with when and how we're going to start, nowadays we're starting. We're presenting this new initiative from SUMMA with the support of KIX LAC. And we're starting with a first section, which is a key element. This is a survey, the poll, regional survey, which will allow us to advance in this, in a regional agenda, in order to go into this practice community, which is an applied one. And later, we're going to have some products and synthesis in order to create a whole cycle, which allowed us to reflect and think about those learnings and minimal shared elements from this process. In concrete, and that is the indication that I wanted to show in this presentation, we're going to have more time for commenting and talking about this, but how to participate and where we're at. So here, Dialoga invites us to do some concrete things, answering this regional survey, which is going to be done during January, February. This is a key survey to build this agenda, regional agenda of priorities from the different countries. So I invite you all to scan these QR codes so you can do the enrollment. There are 2 forms for receiving this information and to participate in this process. The second process is going to start in April and May, which is going to apply for these work peers, which are going to be part of this practice community, which is going to be held or developed during June and October. This working community with the different participants in order to materialize these products, gathering information and creating guidelines towards action and the setting of priorities in policies. To close, I want to invite you to see this, to watch this initiative. This is the space, an initiative which is a regional space, in order to work collectively on priorities of the region, in order to take the most of the evidence, existing evidence that you are bringing, which you are also sharing, and strengthening the capabilities to integrate this knowledge into the educational decision-making in our systems in our region. As I said before, thank you. Thank you for answering, getting enrolled into this form, and then later we're going to send you information about the initiative and the different steps to be followed. Thank you very much, María José. Thank you for giving an introduction to this project. From KIX, we're really happy to make it available for the whole region, so we hope everyone can adhere or join during the year. I want to thank you all for your time, the conversation that we have. We're going to share the synthesis of this conversation, the different challenges that you have set, also the agenda, final agenda of learning, the roadmap that we're going to follow during this year. The different invitations to different spaces that we're going to have during the year, Thank you very much. Our speakers, we want to thank our allies, the SUMMA team, KIX, OX teams we have joined in order to create this space. So see you next and have a nice one. Thank you.
Hasta luego.